Welcome to Alex and Annie, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we are joined today with Meaghan Moylan, who is the Executive Director of the Outpost Group. Meaghan, it's so good to see you.
It's so good to see y'all. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you and learn more about you. And actually, that's where we want to get started is just your history and how you got to be in the vacation rental business and where you are now.
Yeah, of course. Have you ever talked to anyone that's like, I grew up wanting to go into vacation rentals?
No.
Zero people.
Yeah, right? It doesn't exist. Same
Yeah.
thing was happened to me. So after college, I wanted to move to Thailand to teach English. And my sister got engaged and she had a 6-month engagement and said, you can't move to Thailand yet because I'm about to get married and you can't come back and forth for my bachelorette party and all the things. So I was at a bonfire one night in my hometown, which is Destin, Florida. And I know you're very familiar as well.
Yep.
I went to Tyndall Elementary, which I obviously haven't told you this yet.
Yeah.
And so I was back in my hometown waiting for my sister to get married. I went to a bonfire and I met this girl who was raving about her job. And she worked in concierge for a company called 360 Blue and said, I love my job so much. It's the most incredible place. I wake up so excited to go to work every day. And I thought, okay, I need to work here for 6 months before I move to Thailand. And so I applied they had a funny name for it. I remember going on the website that night and it wasn't reservationist. Like it was something cool that meant reservationist. And I just didn't know what that meant because I knew nothing about the industry. And I applied for the job. I did 2 interviews and I got it. And I started on my first day in my cubicle in a call center with a headset on, answering phone calls and thought like, this is going to be amazing. This is the first time I've ever had a salary. This is the first time I've ever had health insurance, which I didn't need because I was 22 and was still on my parents' health insurance. But I never moved to Thailand and I was there for 6 years and did a lot of different jobs. So I moved into the revenue department about 2 months later. Then I was running the revenue department, the reservations department about 6 months later. We went through several acquisitions, grew to be close to 600 units. And I became the chief strategy officer for a couple of years. At this point, we were in Colorado. We were operating in Destin all the way to Panama City and had the majority of our units along 30A. Stayed there. We got acquired in 2020, in September of 2020. And I stayed for a year. And both of you, have you guys worked for companies that have been acquired? Yes, right?
I
No?
have not.
You haven't?
I worked for companies that acquired companies, but not one that actually got acquired.
Yeah,
So
same.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very different on the other side, right? Which is hard in its own way. And being acquired is definitely harder. So it stayed for about a year and things were just different, right? Of course, we had doubled in size. We had 1,500 units total. There was a lot more like red tape and bureaucracy that existed that we just weren't used to working for such a small company. So, and I moved to Austin, Texas, and it was during the pandemic. I was like, I have to get out. We were all working remotely anyway. And I decided to transition out and started looking for jobs on the vendor side and on the property manager side. Had a couple interviews and I remembered that I had connected with this guy named Mecky who owned a company called Outpost in Jackson. I reached out to him on LinkedIn and I was like, this is so bizarre, but do you need anyone to run your vacation rental company? And he said, no, but I need someone to run my holding company that I want to create. Do you want to fly up to Jackson? So I flew up to Jackson. I did an interview for like 3-4 days and started the job. Came here for the summer to help open a coffee shop. And then I never left. And it's been almost 3 years. So it's very different life now that I used to have. I was telling you before we pressed play, I used to be very much in the trenches, even in a director of strategy role. Every day, like I was still communicating with guests and owners so frequently. And now my life looks very different. That's so much strategic and partnership involvement on the vacation rental side, but it's given me a different perspective where I think so much of my decision making was almost skewed because I was so much in the trenches at 360 versus now having this, it's skewed in a different way, right? Where I have this different view on things. And I honestly can't imagine being in any other industry, which is funny because I think a lot of people are like, this is so exhausting. Part of me wants to get out every day. And I have not had, I think maybe I felt that during COVID for a little bit, but the network that we have access to is so different, I feel, than any other industry. industry. And I feel like I just like fall in love, more in love with it every day.
Wow.
Oh, totally agree with you there.
I mean, that's a meteoric rise, I would say, even just in your days at starting at 360 Blue, going from reservations to 2 months later. I mean, you're in a supervisor role and then, pretty quickly into a C-suite role. Clearly shows you're very talented and learned quickly within the industry on
Trial by
what
fire for sure.
what you wanted to do, and they gave you a pathway, which was great. Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, being on the other side of the desk through an acquisition, it's got to be a lot of changes and probably a lot of anxiety too. Companies come in and they say things are going to be the way that one way, but you don't really know if that's going to happen. But it's been fun to watch 360 over the years. I remember when you did expand out west, and that was probably one of the bigger expansions at that time of a company that already had such a big foothold, and a lot of question marks at that point of, can you be multi-market? Just because you're good in one market, does that mean that you can go into another? But I'm curious on that point of, what were some of the challenges that when you were part of it, of that expansion that you got to witness?
It was so hard. I look back at that time. So we had acquired the vacation rental side of St. Joe Company in watercolor. And so we went from 225 units to 500 units overnight. And they were in our same location. And I remember 40 new employees showed up at our office literally the day after we closed. And I sat in my office and I said to my coworker, it feels like we're having an alien invasion. Right.
Yeah.
And that took a very long time to integrate into our existing processes and team. And I remember I was the director of revenue and they had a director of revenue, and just thinking like, what does this mean for me? And what am I going to do? And where's my place going to be in the company? And so when we approached this business with 20 units, 22 units maybe in Colorado, 2 years later, I thought like, oh my God, this will be a piece of cake compared to what we went through. Like nothing will compare to that. And so Ashley, our CEO, said, I want you to oversee this new direction, this acquisition. I want you to go out to Colorado and see how we're going to run this company and how we're going to get more owners and how we're going to retain the owners that we have. And I was like, okay, this is going to be totally fine. And I went out to Colorado for a couple of weeks and it was so hard. The team was like, well, who are you guys? There's this hyper local culture, I think, that exists in ski markets that I didn't understand until I moved to a ski market myself. And I, being from Destin, there already is this, like, if you're not a local, if you're not from here,
it's tribal.
Like, it's very tribal. It is like that on steroids in ski markets.
Right.
And I don't know what it is, but it is the barrier to entry. And I think it's why so many people don't go from a beach market to a ski market unless you have a lot of money and a lot of time and someone really strong that can run that destination for you. Like if you aren't born here, then like you're not from here. And that is very different. Right. And so I think we were seen as outsiders, and the owner was born in Breckenridge and had been there for many years and had very close familial relationships with the owners. And so retaining the owners that we did have was really difficult. And then the team dynamics and trying to figure out, I don't know, like when they're in the same destination as you, getting on one system is very easy because you sit next to each other all day long and they can talk to your marketing director and they can talk to your maintenance director. When it's just me from this big gorilla company at the beach showing up in Breckenridge being like, okay, well, we're going to take you off Streamline and we're going to put you on Escapia. It seems very like, well, what do you mean? You haven't even looked at Streamline yet.
Right.
It was a lot of trial and error. And I remember I met Robin Cragen. This was 2019 at a Verma Connect in Breckenridge. And I thought he was so cool. I had never heard of Moving Mountains before. I mean, this is 6 years ago almost. I like started learning about his company, thought he was so cool. And now years later, he says to me, like, I remember when I met you, I thought, holy shit, this company 360s now in ski markets. What does this mean for me and Moving Mountains and how we can expand? He felt intimidated and I was really intimidated, and we laugh about it now, but going multi-market like that is for a company that's still like family owned and has limited resources versus like a massive company like a Vacasa, it's very different, and it requires resources that you don't think that you need and money that you don't think that you need and time. And I think patience more than anything. I look back now and I wish that I would have spent more time listening instead of talking.
That's a really, really valuable lesson to learn. But I think that the one thing I always noticed was when, speaking of, you go into a market and you're so different. And we tried that at a company that I was at. We tried to work into Tennessee and ended up just partnering with someone, not necessarily buying anybody. But it was the same attitude that I always had when people would come into Panama City Beach and be like, well, we're from, Myrtle Beach, or we're from wherever. And they would tell you, like, this is how we do it. And I was like, well, first of all, this is not how we do it.
Yeah, not how we do
Second of
it.
all, when I went to Expedia, I had to say this a lot, is like, people don't take kindly to strangers coming in and telling them how to do their business. And especially if they come from like a bigger destination, or what the person coming in perceives as a bigger destination of more power. And Panama City Beach and the whole Panhandle dealt with that for a while, where it was just like, you're the Panhandle of Florida, you don't know anything about business. Go to Miami, they know it. Other parts of Florida know it. And they were like, we've been doing pretty well for ourselves the last 20, 30 years. But I can even imagine the differential between like ski and beach, because just the personalities in the markets are so inherently different just on a regular day, not even just a business.
Oh my gosh. I remember being like, well, what do you mean that you guys don't have on call like at night? What happens? And they're like, oh, well, we have one maintenance technician who lives in Dillon, 30 minutes away. And if he can't get because there's a snowstorm, then like we just have to tell the guests sorry. And I just like couldn't comprehend that, right? Being from 360, we had 80 employees and so many resources at our fingertips, and there were 15 vendors. And then you go to a ski town and you have one electrician. Yeah. And so I think just trying to go there and make our same model work and our same software and our same processes work, because it had worked the first time, even if the company is larger, it was in the same destination. Like, it's just such a different blueprint. And like I said, yeah, I just don't think you see these like smaller family-owned companies making that switch from a beach to a ski market easily. And I 100% know now. I like look back at that time in my career, and I think that was easily the most learning I've done in the shortest amount of time. I also was like 25, 26 maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was really hard.
Yeah. Well, like Annie said, I mean, it was a great lesson to learn. And I run into this all the time, that companies that are in a beach market, that their goal is to expand into a ski market. And it's like, okay, I mean, let's really think through that and what, what that looks like, whether that's organically, or which obviously organic is very challenging for other reasons than what you're describing. But, acquiring a company is also a challenge, and you can't be still trying to run and grow your original location and now open as a new brand, or with new ownership, another location. Like, you really have to be thinking about where's the best time spent, of where you can make the most impact, and get to that point where, if you're the owner or the person that's going to be overseeing something like this, like, you've got to have your team in the first location completely dialed in, that you're going to be able to take your attention away from it. And that business isn't going to suffer, because I've seen this happen too, that it's like that first one is typically the bread and butter business, that you don't want that to start declining or suffering, because now your hands are off the wheel and you're looking into greener or snowier pastures.
Yeah, right. Like, that's the horse that's funding this. That was a challenge, and such a good point. Like, being prepared, the leadership team especially, I think our middle management felt this director level, chief level position being taken away, right? Like, we're going out to Colorado and we're working on this, and this with the new team, and they need us a lot. So the middle management is kind of like, wait, like, we need you too. We have 10 times the properties. What does this mean for us? And it is a big challenge. There is something that comes with an acquisition, particularly somewhere across the country, that you have to be so dialed, and you have to have much deeper pockets than you think that you do. And just like someone that you can trust in that destination that lives there permanently is the most important thing.
It's interesting, because I look back in the time that I was in property management, and that was always the thing. And I'm thinking about it now, like, it was always like, you wanted a complementary market so that your cash flow was balanced out. Yeah. And so we always looked at it as an opportunity, not just that, but whenever there was a hurricane in the Gulf, I mean, from being in the Panhandle, that just shuts everybody down. Reservations just cease to exist for that period of time, whether it's 5 days or 7 days or whatever. And you're fighting against the Weather Channel and, they're reporting. And so, like, to think like, okay, where could we go that could balance this out if that happens again? It was automatically the mountain markets, the ski markets. But I think now, and it's, 10 years ago, we didn't have this, urban wasn't a thing. You went to a city, you stayed in a hotel, you always did that. But now there's so many more opportunities there. So I wonder, like, if in retrospect, like, if we had urban destinations, would we have decided to go like from Destin, Panama City? Would we go, oh no, let's go to Nashville and like Atlanta? Like, would we do that instead of trying to go out west? So it'd be curious to see what people would say about that. But certainly a bigger world out there.
Like, the data that we had access to in 2019 versus what we have access to in 2024 is I think this all the time, and I've never like been in this position to feel like back in the olden days, but I would literally assign someone to count the tape chart. Like she would go
Oh
into
God.
the reports were wrong in Escapia. Like it was something where it never worked correctly. And so this, her name was Whitney on the reservations team. She's probably listening to this being like, I remember those days. And she would go in and manually count. And that's how we would understand what our occupancy was.
Oh my God.
And I don't know if you guys know this, but our sheets, so the director of marketing and I were like counterparts when I was running the revenue team at 360. And we had like a menagerie of Google Sheets that we had put together to track occupancy and ADR and RevPAR. And this is like when RevPAR was very first being talked about in the vacation rental space. I'd gone to I'd done the Cornell Hotel Revenue Management certificate. So I came back. It was online. I didn't go anywhere. I came back from my online course and I started saying like, oh my gosh, we have to pull this, this, and this. So we made these spreadsheets and Jason was working on key data at the time. And so he took our spreadsheets and he sent them to the CTO who built them all in key data. And I remember them like unveiling the initial screens for key data to us. And it was like our exact spreadsheets in a software system and feeling like everything is going to change from here now. Like what the industry
isn't that amazing?
5 years will be completely different.
Yeah, the tie-in with key data is super interesting too, and that your menagerie of spreadsheets, played probably a pretty big role in what that platform even is today. But I remember the days of counting things, but for us, it was more going to our competitors' websites and counting how many units that they had left for given weeks. This was when it was still very much Saturday to Saturday, and it's like, okay, this one they've got 100 units today, and now a few more days later, now they're at 70, and they ran a promotion, so it's like it was always just looking at so many different variables. And back then, we looked at the rates, but we didn't have any way of really at scale comparing what we were doing to what they were doing, besides just those obvious things of how many units did they have left, what promotions have they, given out and sent out over email. But those were the olden days, I guess you could say.
Those were the olden days. I know. It's funny because it morphed over time, right? So now we're in this era where like it's so easy to log into key data, or it's so easy to reach out to, you have multiple vendors at your fingertips, where it used to be like,
we almost have too much information now.
Yeah. I mean, then I remember it was like just beyond pricing. And if you wanted to use beyond pricing, like you had to pay a percentage of revenue and it was so expensive, and you had to use like their prices and you couldn't really do anything yourself. And that was, and there was nothing else. And just feeling like, okay, well, we either do everything manually and we have to have 5 people that do this because we have so many units now and it takes all of our time, or we use beyond pricing and they cost so much money. And now you can use beyond pricing or Price Labs or Wheelhouse or like whoever you want to use, and you could use it in whatever way you want to use it. And you can negotiate on the foot. And you would think it would make it easier to do our jobs, and it does in some ways, but all the same pain points still exist.
Just makes it more complex.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. We always talk to people in Lino Maldonado. We've had him on a couple of times, and he talked about it at one point, talking about, like the Leaning Tower of Tech, but it's like a Jenga puzzle. It's like there's all these pieces that go in, and if you move one, something else has to fall into its place. But is it the right thing? And it might not be the right for this property, and it might be that market. And it's just there. I mean, there's just so many pieces of the industry. But what I love about it is, for good, bad, or indifferent, I mean, COVID gave people the time, like Jason and working on key data and all the people that worked in kind of this tech space, the opportunity to make so many advancements that we leapt past I feel let the hotel world. Like we're so much further advanced in technology than they are, and much more adaptable. You still look at large organizations that are running on the same software they've been running on since the 70s, like some of these big hotel brands. And it's like, how is that even remotely possible? I mean, vacation rentals didn't have technology in the 70s, so I guess that's a good thing. We don't have any legacy systems that are sitting around there, but all the technology we have is great technology. So I think we're all grateful for that part of it. It's overwhelming.
I'm curious what you use now, Meaghan. I mean, seeing all the things that you have seen over the years, when you went into Outpost, did you walk in and did they continue using what they had, or have you brought different changes to their tech stack?
So we changed everything when I started. Which was not, this is probably a decision that I would go back and maybe do a little staggering. I started, so at 360, we had really wanted to switch off of Escapia for years and years and years. And we just looked into everything you possibly could imagine, every software. nowhere. And we never got the chance because we got acquired, and Natural Treats had their own proprietary tech. So I felt like this was my opportunity to finally switch. And I had seen every property management. Like we had gone to Boise and looked at LiveRes. Streamline had come in town, and we had spent a couple days with Streamline. We'd had a million conversations with Track and Wes at Direct, who loved the episode, by the way. And so Outpost was using Escapia, and we switched to Track. We signed the agreement like 2 months, maybe a month after I started, like immediately got it going. Of course, like they came into town, they chatted with the team. We made sure it like fit with the team. And we had a 6-month implementation period. And then we also implemented Breezeway at the same time. Work orders were being done previously, like in Asana, the task management system. And it was just something that had kind of existed. I talked about this on an episode recently. Like when you have a small business and what works for you at the time, it doesn't work for you when you grow rapidly. And I feel like you kind of wake up one day and you're like, oh my gosh, we used to have 10 units and now we have 150. And it happened very quickly. And like, we're still using the same software and the same processes that we had when we had 10 units because we haven't had time to do anything about it. And so we use this opportunity to like stop for a second and say like, okay, we can't use Asana for work orders anymore. We actually need to track what we're doing and schedule appropriately and ensure that we're tracking these expenses in such a big cost center for a business, you know, maintenance and housekeeping essentially too. Like on the income side of things, we want to make sure that we're profitable on the housekeeping side. So huge fans of Breezeway. Outpost was already using key data, but we really started to look into like, how could we utilize it even more than we already are? Are we ensuring that we are like using the system to its maximum capability, which I think just kind of speaks to what we were talking about too, with so many options and so much going on. A lot of the time you find yourself using 10% of the tech that you're paying for. Where are you actually using every single feature that it has? Or have you at least looked into it to know if it's a good fit for you or not? And so, yeah, we made those two big switches to Track and Breezeway from Escapia and Asana. And we did switch all of our links or our locks over to links and had keyless entry, which was a big game changer too. It was a lot in a short amount of time. Like this is all kind of in the span of probably 8 months. And then we took a very long break and took a very deep breath for a while. But yeah, it was like very quick in making sure that we were also experiencing the decline of the COVID boom. Like when I started, it was May 2021 was incredible. And so the decline hit Jackson sooner than everybody else, I feel like. And I don't know if it's because it's a hard market to get to. And so what was already difficult to travel here became even more difficult when people started traveling less and going over to Europe, spending less money. And so we had made these massive investments in 2021 and 2022. We saw this massive decline in reservations, which really led to this like scare for a bit.
Yeah. And a lot of change management that I'm assuming you probably learned a good bit about that during the 360 days and those different stories, but it's a lot to do all at once. But sometimes it's better just to get it all over with and then be able to now start kind of fresh and be on a new footing to move forward in the direction that you want to go. So hopefully things have settled down since all the new implementations.
They have. We recently started using InHaven, which we're excited about. So that's our newest tech in the stack. And so I'll be able to report back. But we have absolutely loved working with the team so far. And really just for purchasing. I don't know. I mean, keep in mind, we're in the mountains. Okay. We don't have a Walmart or anything. So, and even purchasing from like Standard Textile for linens, things take a while to get here.
Oh, geez.
And if we want to go to Sam's Club, it's a 2-hour drive or Costco. I know. It's like a big problem with me because I'm a big shopper, big Sephora.
Oh gosh. So you have to take like a full weekend to go like do all your shopping then, I would assume.
Yeah. Salt Lake is like 5 hours away. So if you want like actual shopping, you can drive down to Salt Lake. But this is awful. I use conferences as to get my city fill.
Yeah. So I do the same thing. I do the same.
Yeah. I mean, you're in a similar boat. Like when we go, where were we last? New Orleans, right? I'm like, what can okay, so there's a mall here. I have this opening in my schedule. I can go over everything that I need. And that is how I live my life, is like conference to conference, being able to all Uber, where it tracks conferences in Minneapolis every year. So I went to the Mall of America in September by myself. It was like, you could go to this dinner with vendors, or I could go to the Mall of America by myself. And I went there.
Sorry, bye, I'm gone.
It's very, that's the biggest challenge for me over here, is the lack of shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh, that's definitely a challenge for sure. We'll be back in just a minute after a word from our premier brand sponsor, Extend Team.
My name is Jane Field. I work for Del Mar Vacations and manage the guest services department. And we just started using Extend Team in the first week in January of 2024. So we're a pretty small local company here on Cape Cod, and all of our staff is local. We have up to 400 houses that we manage, and we need to be available 24/7 for any guests that are in-house and any problems that they're experiencing so that they can call us. And we were having a hard time with staffing to be able to provide that coverage. You know, we have a lot of inquiries that come in, especially from like Airbnb at night. Guests are looking to book pretty instantaneously, and if we're not responding to them pretty quickly, real time, we're less likely to get them to book because I think they're just looking to book right then and there. So now we have somebody that can answer any questions or anything coming through very quickly and get bookings for us, which is good. And then, like I said, she's also helping with some administrative tasks that we in the office just don't have time to do throughout the day-to-day. Since working with Extend Team, it's helped us provide after-hours coverage to in-house guests and also be able to help ensure that we can get bookings all day long and that guests aren't waiting for communication from us, until the next business day, which has really helped us.
The best news is Extend Team has an exclusive offer just for listeners of Alex and Annie podcast. Receive 50% off your onboarding fee when you visit extendteam.com/Alex and Annie or mention our podcast when you contact them.
Now that, things have kind of evened out as far as pace is concerned, I think we're all seeing that in every market. I've heard some cool things that you guys do as far as guest experience, and just curious, how your focus evolved, I guess, since you first got to the company to now in the different things that you do within the unit and how you're, really creating that guest experience kind of more as a focus these days.
Yeah, I think, when I first started, it was very much like, how can we make sure that we are ahead of what's coming toward us, right? Like our competition is going to continue to get on a better tech stack, and our competition is going to continue to ensure that their pricing is maximized. They're going to be using every tool out there, right? Like just imagining that anything that we're already thinking of, our competition has already done, even if they haven't and they haven't thought about it, I think allowed us to start like innovating or die, which I love that saying. And so we went through that like 8 to 12 month period where it was so much change. And so the next year we called it the sustainability year, basically like, okay, all this change, our business has evolved significantly. We had, before I started, Outpost was doubling in size year over year, owner-wise. So what started in 2014, and we have about 800 professionally managed homes in Jackson, period, like such a small market. And we manage about 260 of them. And that grew like pretty quickly starting in 2018, like pretty small company, and then doubling in size starting in 2018. And so this kind of became like, okay, we have a completely new tech stack. We have a lot more owners. COVID has died down. Demand has died down. Like, how can we remain a sustainable business for the long term? Like, how can we continue to build our cash reserves and make sure that we're in a really, really healthy financial position? So that morphed into studying cash flow in a different way than we had before. Like, rather than a monthly basis, we're looking at it weekly, and we know exactly when we're going to go in the negative and what that means for us and what we need to do payroll wise and when we need to start spending money. And we took a really hard look at the budget, and rather than cutting expenses, we held on a lot of things. So we didn't make big linen purchasing decisions, right? Like we just kind of held tight for about a year just to see like, okay, how sustainable can we make this business? Let's refine all of our processes and make sure that we're doing things to the best of our ability. Let's really cater to the top 20% of our homeowners and make sure that retention is not even something that we have to think about because they love us so much. And then the same thing on the guest side. And our focus has really been, our tagline is welcome to our home. And so we bring everything back to how can we make sure that every guest feels like they're checking into their own home. And it was a year of that. And it was hard, right? Like our team had been so exhausted across all of the businesses that we have and not just Outpost. And our team was tired. They'd been through what felt like war. And, we really just said like, okay, this is going to be a year of no change. We had a lot of change and we were very, very busy for a very long time, what seemed like forever. And now like, let's just hold tight and make sure that everything we have, like we're really, really refining it and making sure it's perfect. And I almost think back to Unreasonable Hospitality because I feel like Will Guidara talks about that too. Like before moving to the next level, like have you perfected everything that you have?
Yeah.
And now we're kind of getting out of that and we're back into, okay, now we're innovating again. And what more can we change? And the team got this like year to take a deep breath and we're in a really great position, which is awesome to see.
So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned you've got a couple of different businesses kind of within the portfolio of Outpost. Was it intentional to start these businesses or was it something that they were in the market and you acquired them? Like, how did this all come to be?
It really wasn't intentional. Before I started, the owner of Outpost, Mecky, had started O2 Cleaning. And we have a cleaning company here mainly due to like retention purposes of housekeepers and just wanting to control that experience for guests and for homeowners. So O2 Cleaning started, and rather than contractors, all of the housekeepers are employed by O2 Cleaning, which provides services to Outpost and also other vacation rental companies in Jackson and commercial businesses and residential. They clean my house. O2 Cleaning's been great. And then Provision started. So two chefs, one of them now being my fiance, started a business during COVID. Yeah, meal delivery service. So they were executive chefs in town and got laid off during COVID when all the restaurants stopped obviously working, and they started doing catered meal delivery, and it became this huge catering company. Now when weddings came back, they're catering massive weddings in Jackson, and Mecky was like, I actually want to be a part of that. Like, would you guys be interested in partnering together? And that gave us this experience to have private chefs for our homeowners and our guests, but they make donuts. And so we have a box of their donuts in every one of our homes for each arrival. And then came Terrain, which is our landscaping and snow removal company. And we had someone approach us that owned a landscaping company that was exhausted, ready to get out of the service industry. And we thought, like, this is another way that we could integrate this into our vertical. Our owners need landscaping and snow removal. So we bought that business. And then we had the coffee company that we were utilizing to put coffee in all of our homes for our arrivals. They reached out to us and said, hey, we're exhausted and we're looking to sell. And you're one of our largest customers because you put coffee in every single one of your homes before your guest arrivals. Would you be interested in buying us? And we were like, we don't have enough businesses. Let's do it. So then we bought a coffee company. And then we had a coffee shop on Town Square come available, a space. And the owner reached out to us and said, hey, I own this coffee shop. I don't want to do a brick and mortar space anymore. I just want to roast coffee and send it out to other businesses. Like, do you want to rent this space? And we were like, yes. So we built out the space and opened a coffee shop 2 summers ago. And so, yeah, we've got quite the book of business going, and it all really like kind of came in waves, which we're thankful for. But it was all really during the same year that we were switching the entire tech stack over at Outpost. So we were opening a coffee shop at the same time. Yeah, I felt like the sustainable year was also a year of sleeping afterward.
Because you drank too much coffee.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
That's cool though, because I mean, those are all very symbiotic businesses and they, feed your properties, but then also feed others in the market. And I would imagine that probably creates good relationships with you and your competitors to a certain extent. What is the market like out there? I mean, do the companies kind of work together or they kind of stay in their own lane?
So it's been really cool. The summer that I moved to Jackson, which was about 6 months after I started, worked remotely during that time period. So I came up here for the summer 3 years ago almost to move into our coffee shop, and we were building out the space and just kind of manage the project. And we also started Jackson Hole Lodging Association with a couple of other owners of vacation rental companies at that same time. And we were dealing with regulation for homes that are located within or outside of this overlay that was created in the town of Jackson where you are allowed to rent vacation homes. And we were fighting that regulation. It didn't impact impact Outpost, but it was really just a way for us to come together for the vacation rental managers who were affected, which obviously like we want to make sure that short-term rentals are as friendly as possible in the space. So even if it wasn't directly impacting us, we wanted to be a part of the fight. And so we developed this really like friendly, competitive relationship with the main property management companies in the area, Rachel Allday being one of them, who owns Abode in Park City, but also Abode in Jackson and Sun Valley. And now she and I are like great friends and go out to dinner and are technically competitors. But the creation of the Lodging Association was one of the coolest things I've been able to be a part of since moving here.
That's really cool. That's great.
I wanted to ask you you brought up regulations, and you guys sit in a really unique space where you've got all these national parks. And so there's a lot of protection that needs to happen and things that I think most people would be in agreement. You want to be protecting of like our natural resources and these beautiful parks. And I had a neighbor years ago that they still to this day, they go to Jackson Hole every year. Like that is their family vacation. They go to ski and they know it takes them forever to get there. It's like 2 days to fly because they always get stuck somewhere. But they talk about just how incredibly beautiful it is. And it's just just seeing it grow is it's great and wonderful because like, oh, we get these new businesses when we go, there's new restaurants or there's new something, but it's encroaching on these larger areas of these national parks. And so I would imagine, and I could be wrong, but that you guys have a whole different regulatory conversation than just somebody like in Destin. I mean, Destin, it's, Destin, Panama City, it's just like, okay, we don't have enough roads. You can't park 27 cars at this one house because there's not enough space. Like there's things like that because they've built these giant houses, but we're not encroaching on, again, protected land. And so how do you navigate that?
It's challenging in a lot of ways, a lot. So the first is on the staffing side. In a place like Destin, you can live in Freeport or Defuniak Springs or even further than that and drive down. We don't really have that option here because all of the land that surrounds us is national forest and national park land. So we've got 2 towns that our employees can live in that are a little outside of Jackson. They're still incredibly expensive. And in the winter, one of them's over a mountain pass. So it could close and does close really frequently in the winter during snowstorms. And then we also have a town that you have to drive through a canyon, which also closes because it's very dangerous in the winter. So that's an issue. And then we also have this responsibility to ensure that our guests are treating the community appropriately. And, we all know this, right? Like the second the guests are acting a fool, it's immediately on the property management companies and not the hotel.
Right.
Yeah. And so we're fighting this uphill battle all the time that mainly is really around like education. Okay, you're going to come in contact with a moose, most likely. Do not feed the moose. And things that, seem obvious, but a lot of it is education around the area. Like this area is very protected and very sacred to so many people who have been ranchers for hundreds of years and who have had this land in their family. So if you're on a walk, don't throw your coffee cup in someone's yard. Don't walk through behind a fence that you shouldn't be walking on. You could actually get shot. Like it is the Wild West. A lot of ways. So we focus a lot on education and we keep FAQs on our website for our guests. Like this is how far away you should stay from animals. This is how you should treat people when you're in town. And it has helped. And then, when guests are in town, we continue to kind of reiterate that education. And on just like the community side, we work really hard to ensure that we have really good relationships with businesses in the community. And a lot of it, like we employ over 200 people in Jackson, which the population here is 10,000. So there aren't a lot of people that live here in general, but we donate 1% of our revenues to the Community Housing Trust, which helps provide housing to families in Jackson. Housing is a major issue here as it is in most ski markets and markets in general already. So 1% of our revenues for a coffee shop goes there, and that allows us to kind of build these relationships. And we encourage our guests to do as much locally as they can, which I think we have a McDonald's and a Wendy's and a Dairy Queen, and that's it. So like pretty much what you do is local anyway. And I think that has really helped with just the view on vacation rentals, like just making sure working hard. And then of course the Jackson Hole Lodging Association, just having a seat at the table to have those conversations when we are caught in any type of crossfire between like the guests and the town, making sure that we have a seat at the table to be a part of those decisions and speak on behalf of all the positive things that we do provide to the community.
Right. Yeah, you guys are doing it right. I mean, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And by having that seat
So
and,
true.
having those relationships, you can eliminate and get ahead of problems so much better than if you have to find out about problems and the things that are being done to address them, and then now you don't have any ability to affect any change. So
Yeah.
that's really exciting to hear. I did want to switch gears just a little bit, and we want to talk about your podcast that you just recently launched this year, and it has been awesome to listen to, and I've already learned a lot from it. Espressos and Workflows, and you're on Will Slicker's network, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How did it come about? Like, tell us, as fellow podcasters, we love
Yeah, right.
talking shop. What made you think of the idea?
You guys are a tough act to follow. Let me just say that. I was very just the podcasting space, which everyone obviously you're so incredible and everyone is so friendly in the podcasting space in the industry anyway. So Will approached me. We had become friends back in the fall, and he texted me a couple days before Christmas with a graphic of the podcast. He had taken my headshot and put it into Workflows and Espressos with a photo of it and said, "Hey, this is totally random, but would you ever host a podcast? I had this idea." And I was like, I've literally never thought about it, but okay. I said this to someone recently, but I did this year of yes last year where every opportunity.
I heard you talking about that on your show. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I essentially try to say yes to every single opportunity, every speaking engagement, every podcast, every anytime anyone asked me, the lodging association, whatever, to be a part of, I said yes, which was exhausting, but also I met more people last year than I have probably in the last 10 years of my life. And it's been so cool. And now have this really amazing network where, if I want to go on vacation in Myrtle Beach, then I can call you up.
Yeah.
So I said yes, obviously, of course. And he provided the content for season 1 or an outline and basically said look, we'll edit the show for you and we'll produce it. And here are some ideas of what I would love for you to talk about in season 1. We'll just do 7 episodes and see how it does. So we did. And it was really cool and got people who actually listened to it that weren't my mom, which I remember telling him, I feel like it's going to get 5 listens.
Yeah.
And
I remember those days.
he was like, I mean, it will for a little bit. It's going to be a while before it really starts to pick up. And after 7 episodes, he called me and said, "Hey, we actually got a good amount of listens and there seems to be people know about the podcast. So would you be interested in doing more?" And so I said, yes. So now every Tuesday, a new episode comes out, which, oh my gosh, is a lot of pressure. I don't know if you guys feel this way, but the pressure to create content on a weekly basis, and do your job and make sure that you're making time to record and make sure that you're catering to what people are talking about in the industry and what people want to hear about has been challenging in a totally different way, which I very much appreciated. I feel it's catering to this creative side that I didn't know that I had, and just being able to connect with people that I had never spoken to before. Even I'm sure this happens to y'all all the time, but someone that comes up to you and says, "Hey, I listened to your podcast and I learned this," that's really all it takes for you to want to keep doing it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a couple of times where Alex and I were at conferences and we'd be in different spaces and somebody would come up and they're talking to me and they're they know me. And I'm thinking oh my God, I'm really getting old. I really don't know who this person is. And I finally would just be so embarrassed. And I'd be like, "I'm so sorry. Where did I meet you?" And they're like, "Oh, no, I've never met you. We listened to your podcast." or somebody that would know Alex and they assume they knew me or vice versa. Or people who would say, "Are you Alex? Or are you Annie?" I'm like, "What do you mean? You don't know who we are?" And then I was like, those are the people that aren't watching the YouTube stuff. But to your point, in the very beginning, it was the first people that reviewed were our dads. They were our number one fans. And they were "We're sticking with you with the long haul." I don't think my dad has listened to an episode in probably 6 months. It's
Really?
he probably binges it now. I think he's just his health struggles have kept it from doing, but it's just so funny, how it changes your whole dynamic about your relationship with people and that feeling you don't know anybody. You really know everybody on some level in the industry at this point. And it's so much easier. I remember when Alex and I first started, it was we would reach out to people, and there were people that I had been reaching out to in various situations through my career, wouldn't take my phone call if I paid for them. The second I had a podcast, all of a sudden they were like, "How quickly can I talk to you?" And it was just it just opened up, this whole world of people, but so great and so gracious, and people have been so supportive. And whenever there's been struggles for either one of us, I mean, we've had more friends than we could imagine just to be there, to just be a sounding board or help you kind of your creative flow, or just to give you advice. I mean, it's such a great industry overall. And that's what we found. Vacation rentals is to your point in the very beginning, like, this is the place that we belong, and we're just confirmed, like, the podcast helped confirm that without a doubt.
Yeah. It's been really cool. I just feel like, I don't know, like nothing else exists like this, even if it
Right?
does. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just feel
We
like
just don't know it.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
I don't know, every day and every month that passes, I feel like more and more connected to this network that exists within our industry. And yeah, like you said, I just feel in any way, like if I came across a decision and I didn't know what to do, or we had an issue in any of our businesses really, or like whatever it is, I feel like I could call 5 people and every single person would be like, do you need me to come up there and help? Like there is this, or like, I've been through this already. Here's what I did to handle it. And I don't know, I just feel like it doesn't come around very often. And so whenever I think like, oh my God, I'm exhausted and this has been 10 years of my career, and would I ever want to do anything different? I just think through like, no, this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, it's hard when you have such a network of people and relationships that you've built over the years. And I get that question often now that I'm in my own lane as a marketing consultant, that people have asked, well, would you do marketing for other industries? And I wouldn't rule it out completely, but am I looking for work outside of this? No. I mean, I've got enough addressable of an audience and a lot of people that I'd love to work with that are, I know them. I know their businesses. I know their families in some cases. And I remember in 2021, when we went to San Antonio, we made a LinkedIn announcement at that conference that we were going to be starting a podcast. And I felt like at that conference, like we knew a lot of people, but then every conference thereafter, it's like, it has just compounded so much of people that we've met through the show. And it's a rewarding thing. And in between going to these events, it makes you feel like you're still really connected with our friends and, new people that we meet every week. And unlike your show, though, yours is more educational, where you're teaching things each week, or like tips and tricks. That's never been our style. So we don't have to prepare as much, which I would say.
I always think like, I said this a couple of times, like to all those teachers that ever told me that I talk too much. I was like, in your face. This is exactly what I was preparing for, to just talk too much,
I'm making money off my voice now, right?
We're certainly giving it a try. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Meaghan, big things coming down the pike for you, getting married later this year. So you've got a big wedding coming up. We're super excited for that. To add to your daily grind, what else do you have going on?
I have been trying to figure out what my travel is going to look like this year. A lot of talk about conferences and which conference I want to go to. I've also joined, I keep a sticky note on my desk, but like 4 or 5 committees or advisory boards, which seemed like amazing at the time. And now I'm like, you know what? I think I did a lot as Annie, because we're on one together. So yes, pretty busy with the commitments. And then I'm also planning my wedding with a turnaround time of 8 months. Now we're at 6 months. So I've got my dress, I've got my venue. We've got most of our vendors booked, but my fiance and I are getting married in Puerto Rico.
Destination wedding. Oh my goodness.
That's a great idea, by the way. If I could go back and do it again, definitely would have done a destination.
It's very exciting.
We had a hurricane the year we got married, so we didn't get to do any of that stuff. We got to get married and have a reception at the church, so just enjoy all of it.
Right. I know. I'm like praying for good weather. The reception's indoors, but the ceremony is outdoors. And we have an amazing planner, luckily, but I just paid for the invitations yesterday. It's a 2-month lead time. So hopefully they make it here in 2 months. We'll see. But yeah, so lots of wedding planning. I don't know. I feel like my obligations since my year of yes have really tripled by 10, which has been really fun in a lot of ways, but there's definitely like never a lot of free time these days.
I so relate to that. I think my year of yes was 2021 going into 2022, that I said yes to everything too. And exactly the same experience you had, that it opened up a lot of doors, but then it got to a point where I'm like, I am definitely being stretched too thin. And I think this is my year of, instead of always saying yes and not saying no, it's not right now. Maybe another time. Cause it gets really tough, but you are a little bit younger than me, and so I would say keep saying yes for a little bit longer because it is worth it. And you even said yes to your husband, so I'm sure he was happy that
Yeah,
I
right?
was
I know.
here.
I'm
Yes.
yes all over the place these days. You know, it's gonna be like a maybe here soon, probably. As we want to start a family, and we'll see. I don't know. My clock is already ticking though. Like I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna be 31 when we get married, which means that if we wait a year, then I'll be 32. And so you start like backing your time out. Like, okay, if I have my first kid when I'm 33, then what does this mean for it? So that's kind of also the life that I'm in. But I was talking to my future mother-in-law this morning on the phone, and she listens to every episode of my podcast. And after my podcast, she listens to it. She sends me a text and she's like, I just love when you talk about this. She's like the best person in the whole world. Anyway, she always gives this advice like, hey, why don't you just sit down and think about it and like rest for a little bit, and then you'll know what to do next. And so
give yourself that space.
That's sound advice. That's very sound advice.
right?
Well, I think I'm going to see you at the Executive Summit, which is coming up.
See you in
that's
just a
super
couple weeks.
exciting. That's definitely looking forward to that. But if any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, Meaghan, what's the best way to find you and also to find your podcast?
LinkedIn is definitely the best way. I've been trying to be better about posting.
Does your podcast have a LinkedIn page too, or?
It does not. I need to do that. If you could go to workflowsandespressos.com, and that is the best way to find, or podcast app on Apple or Spotify.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we will include that in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us today. For everybody listening, we appreciate you, and we will see you next time.